Good morning. Today is Monday, July 21st, 2028. Yesterday, we discussed the topic of Ir Miklat, the cities of refuge. We focused on one detail. Remember, the cities of refuge were part of the system of Jewish criminal law during the time that the Beit HaMikdash was standing. And it was a process that applied to a person who had killed another person, but the action was done either accidentally or through negligence. So it was not capital murder, but it was an accident, negligence, which still, of course, caused the life of a person. And so that person was required to go to one of the Ir Miklat, one of the cities of refuge. They were located all over Israel, spread out. And it was intended to be a rehabilitative process. A person was in the presence of a majority of role model people, good people, spiritual people. So the atmosphere was one that was conducive to rehabilitation. And the idea was to try to impress upon the person the importance of not making a mistake, not being negligent, and then to be able to return to their home, their family. Well, their family would come with them into the Ir Miklat, but for them all to go home. There's another aspect of this, and that is that while the person was in the city and the borders, the boundaries of the city were very clearly marked, no relative of the victim could take revenge. And the worry was that if the person had been found guilty of capital murder, they would be charged through the criminal system and they would be punished. However, if the person was adjudicated to have been negligent or it was accidental death, then the family of the victim might think that they wanted to take revenge because still all in well, their relative was dead. And so therefore, in order to allow for this rehabilitation, the system was set up so that as long as the person was inside the limits of the city of the Ir Miklat, the city of refuge, no one could touch them. No one could take refuge, no one could touch them. Now this did two things. Number one, it allowed time for the family to, so to speak, cool down. And also, it provided an automatic boundary to keep people inside because there were no walls, there was no barbed wire, there were no guards. But people were very, very careful to stay inside the bounds because they knew that if they went outside the bounds, their life could be in danger. And the Torah says that the length of time that a person would spend in this Ir Miklat was Admos HaKohein Gadol, until the death of the Kohein Gadol, which means that at the moment the Kohein Gadol, the high priest, died, everyone in all these cities went home, regardless of how much time they served. And we asked the question, well, first of all, it does seem unfair that the length of time a person will spend there is somehow an arbitrary amount. One person could end up spending just a number of days if the Kohen Gadol passed away right away, and another person could end up spending decades there. So how is that fair? And we also asked the second question, what's the connection? Why is it that the death of the Kohen Gadol is the reason that everybody goes home? So yesterday I deferred both of those questions. Today I want to say that the first question I asked, the apparent unfairness of it, I don't have an answer to that. And if you come up with an answer, I'd love to hear it. But I do want to share with you two answers about the connection of the death of the Kohein Gadol to the release of all these people in the cities of refuge. And I believe that both of these answers are true, and both of these answers teach us important lessons, even though I am admitting that I do not yet have an answer that is satisfactory to me for the other question of how is it that different people have different terms. Okay, so that we're going to leave. The first answer of how this is connected to the Kohen Gadol is based on the Talmud. The Gemara says that the Kohen Gadol should have prayed for mercy for the generation, which obviously he failed to do. In other words, the job of the Kohen Gadol, the role of the Kohen Gadol, is to pray that the people of Israel will live in peace and not have accidents and not act negligently. Now, obviously, if a person is going to act in an intentional, premeditated fashion, that's not something that the Kohen Gadol's prayers can help, because everyone has freedom to choose right or wrong, and a person who does it on purpose is going to be treated with the full extent of the criminal law. But the prayers of the Kohen Gadol should help that there are no accidents of this type, that there is no negligence of this type. And therefore, the fact that this did happen somehow reflects on a shortcoming, however minute, shortcoming of the Kohen Gadol. And therefore, the full atonement for the person who did this act, who is now in Ir Miklat, the full atonement is achieved when the Kohen Gadol dies. And to support this, remember the really interesting paragraph that we have in our davening on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur afternoon, we describe the avodah, the service of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur in the Beit HaMikdash. And remember, he went lifnayo lifnim, he went into the Holy of Holies, the only time of year that he went in. And when he went in and then he came out unharmed, our Machzor says that he said a prayer. And that prayer is so interesting, because if you look at what the Kohen Gadol is praying for, you see the real role of the Kohen. Because it's not just what we think of as spiritual things. He prays that there be no floods. He prays that no one will, God forbid, lose a baby. He prays that the prices will stay low. Very, very mundane things. The Kohen Gadol is concerned with the welfare of all the people of Israel. Hopefully we're going to talk more about that prayer as we get closer to Yom Kippur, because it's an incredible prayer. And part of that is his prayer that people should be safe and no one should have an accident like this. I think that this answer can be expanded. Because to say that the Kohen Gadol has a share, however small, in the responsibility of the act that led to the person going to Golus, to exile, I think is meant to teach us a wider lesson. Because the Kohen Gadol also represents Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, the community of Israel. And I think, and this is based on a number of other passages, I won't go into all of the proofs for it now, but I believe that what the Torah means to teach us here is that there is a certain sense in which society is to blame. Of course, this does not remove the responsibility to the person who acted. But there is also a recognition that society did not do enough to prevent this accident from happening. If it was a case of negligent driving, maybe the laws about driver education need to be increased. If it's a situation of tools that were accidentally caused, God forbid, a death, maybe there need to be stricter rules about the safety of tools. In some sense, society bears some responsibility to try to make sure that accidents and negligence do not happen without taking away the responsibility of the individual that did it. And so the death of the Kohein Gadol, who represents the society, is meant to say that there are two partners responsible for this. And society as a whole has got to think about what can we do better to prevent this kind of thing from happening. That's one approach. The Rambam, Maimonides, has another approach. And he says that the person who caused the death of someone else by accident or negligence has to go into an Ir Miklat, as I explained before, because of the anger of the Goel Hadam, the relative of the victim, who may seek revenge. And as long as the perpetrator is out of sight in some other city, the relative has a chance to cool down. The person is not walking around on their block every day, going past them, seeing them in the store, which would cause the anger to continue to bubble and burn. When the Kohein Gadol dies, the Rambam says the relative of the victim becomes reconciled. How is that? The Kohein Gadol was the highest spiritual leader of the Jewish people. Like Aharon, the first Kohen Gadol, he was the friend of every single Jewish person. His role was to promote peace among the people. Normally, he was a beloved figure. And there is a phenomenon that when something happens to the nation, for example, someone very, very beloved, who is very respected and has a very high position, when that person dies, people start to take stock. And they think about what's important in life and their priorities. And a person would have the chance to think to themselves, listen, God's law says that this person should go home. Who am I to interfere with God's law? And it's for the best that I leave aside my anger, because it will kill me as much as it will kill him. In other words, according to the Rambam, the Kohen Gadol himself has nothing to do with guilt or atonement, but simply the fact that it causes a national collective grief. And in that situation, people start to set aside their own misfortunes let go of their individual needs, and start to reorder their priorities. The truth is, we find this today, not just in death, not just in the death like the Kohein Gadol, but in other sorts of deaths. You can think of your own life, of some national or international figure who died, and in your life, it caused some real taking stock. I would say for me personally, when Martin Luther King was assassinated, I was old enough to be aware of what was happening. And I would say that event caused me to think more about relations between whites and blacks and the injustices and what we have to do to fight them. I was only a boy, but that had a big impact on me. And I'm sure you in your life have your own examples. And not only that, but events. I know many people watching the tragic, terrible news from Texas a few weeks ago of the flooding and the deaths. A horrible, terrible event. And I know people who said to me, and I said to people, my little tzara, my little difficulty, my inconvenience, it's nothing. At least my family is safe. At least my home is intact. I'm not going to worry about small things. In my own life, when certain serious things have happened, and I'm dealing with frightening, serious things, the small things don't matter. The petty things don't matter. And this is an important way of looking at the world, because when these things do happen, God forbid, and they hopefully should never happen, but when they do happen, it's an important way of looking at the world. I should take a lesson from it. And I should think to myself, thank God that I do not have that problem. Okay, I have a little problem over here, but it's nothing, it's nothing, it's nothing. All of us can be more or less petty. All of us can be more or less self-centered, inflamed by emotion or anger. And we go up and down. If we're honest, most of us go up and down. But since we are capable, under certain circumstances, of leaving aside our petty concerns and reordering our priorities to what is really important, then the Torah says, God says, we have to try that. And so here are two lessons, both crucial, both true, that whenever something happens in a society, the individual who did it is responsible, but society also has to look at how do we prevent it. And number two, when something serious happens, and it's a national tragedy or a tragedy just within our sphere, we have to take it to heart and reorder our priorities and make sure that we are not acting in a petty manner or a self-centered manner, but we're thinking about what is really important in life. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.